Hi, I'm Duncan Lacey. I'm Director of Innovation at Food Portal, and in this video I'll give you a brief demonstration of the service. So when you log in, you can see any outstanding incidents and responsive actions that are displayed on a user-specific basis, as well as anything that's outstanding on the internal audit schedule. So you get really good visibility of anything that's coming up, and there's nothing that can be forgotten about. The first thing that I'd really like to show you is the company profile. And here you can upload any approval evidence that you would like to share with your customers. And if you provide them with the organisation ID right here, they would simply be able to go to the Supplier Directory and enter your organisation ID, and that makes it available to your customers as a read-only version. And any time that you update any of your certificates or any of your contact details, that will be available to your customers in real time. So there's a massive potential to cut down on the amount of emails and administration work if you have a large customer base. Coming into the Suppliers tab, we can have a profile for each of your suppliers, and you can tell that it's very similar to your own company profile, and you can upload any approval parameters and attachments that you need for that supplier. But in addition to that, if your supplier is on the Food Portal Supplier Directory, or if they're a member, you'll be able to link their profile directly into your own approval records, and that means that your supplier can manage their own approval evidence on your behalf. So they upload their certificates and you have access to them in real time, which is really helpful because the Food Portal Supplier Directory is free to use, so all of your suppliers will be able to do that with no barriers. And when we come on to the Attachments Overview tab, you can see that every approval that you have across every supplier is visible to you on a single table, which you can sort by expiry date. So you just have really easy visibility over everything. Coming into raw materials, you can list out your raw materials by their code and description, and then on the risk assessment tab, risk assess each supply route independently. So I'll take you into the whole egg powder supplied by Cracking Powders as a example, and you can see that you've got your own product code as part of the reference in addition to the supplier's product code, so you can always validate based on delivery records and invoices that you have the correct raw material for the risk assessment. You have a version controlled raw material risk assessment and a facility to upload attachments, which would include things like surveillance testing and things like kosher certificates, which are particular to the raw material, not just the supplier. So I'll bring you into the draft copy of the risk assessment, and all of the sections are listed out in a navigation pane, just like on a retail specification system. And I'll click through fairly briefly onto all of those, but before I do, just like to let you know that you can indicate any number of manufacturer sites per supply route, and they're available to select from your list of suppliers. So just coming through on the composition, you can see that each component that goes into a raw material can be risk assessed based on its countries of origin, HARA requirements like moisture and pH. You can do your allergen risk assessment indicating contains, may contain, does not contain, or validated free from. Quality attributes can be defined with accept and reject values as well as tolerances. Both chemical and microbiological parameters can be catalogued here, and for each parameter you can determine a separate testing frequency. With dietary suitability, you can indicate an unlimited number of assurance schemes or dietary compatibility, and each time you do, you can record the dietary scheme, governing body, material categories, and certificate numbers. For vulnerability to substitution, adulteration and fraud, it's all built around the BRC version 8 risk assessment criteria, and in each instance you can select a low, medium or high risk outcome. So it really guides you through the process of carrying out your vulnerability assessment, and it ultimately outputs an outcome to specify whether you need to have analytical testing as a fraud mitigation tactic. You also have a free text field to record any further information on a material specific basis. For release criteria, you can provide your goods intake staff with instructions for the particular challenges that each delivery needs to be subject to for acceptance. With packaging, you can record every layer on the packaging layers table, and for the purposes of foreign body controls, record whether or not it's staple-free packaging. And finally, with the authorization, just record the reason for change and move the status to active to progress the version of the risk assessment onto the next copy. And ultimately, this all leads into a set of site control documents, which includes your approved list for purchasing, allergen risk assessment, acceptance criteria, vulnerability assessment, and surveillance schedules. And I'll dip into just a couple of these to demonstrate. So for your approved list for purchasing, you can see that where you have multiple supply routes for the same raw material, each supply route is detailed along with the manufacturer sites associated with that supply route, and the controlled document is itself version controlled, so the draft copy of the approved list will always reflect the active copies of the risk assessments. And just to give another demonstration, if I have a look at the acceptance criteria for raw materials, you'll see again that it's pulling through the acceptance criteria that were detailed on the individual risk assessments for every supply route. And as is the case with all of these controlled documents, it is itself version controlled. For products, you can detail each product by its code and its description, and adding a product to this table produces a product record, which is very similar in its layout to a raw material risk assessment, in that you have version control product specifications and a facility to upload attachments. If we look at the draft copy of a product specification, you'll see it's immediately compatible with the presentation of information for a raw material risk assessment. And the reason for that is that you can provide your customers with the product ID for any of your products, and they would be able to go into their raw material risk assessments and link directly from your product specification into their approval systems. So for demonstration, I'll pop the product ID into here, and you can see that it's picking up that it's receiving a bread roll product specification. And to demonstrate, I have set up a linked product record for pasteurized liquid egg coming from Wholesome Egg Company. So in effect, this is a raw material risk assessment which is automatically populated from a supplier's product specification, and you can see that at numerous points throughout the risk assessment it's saying I don't need to administrate in the manufacturer sites because it's already populated from the product specification supplied by the supplier, and the same rings true for parameters such as allergens. So it really eliminates that administrative work. But because this is an internal risk assessment, there's certain parameters like the microbiological surveillance schedule that's not populated from the supplier's product specification, because you can determine your own internal risk surveillance frequency. And similarly, with the vulnerability to substitution and alteration and fraud, underneath the vulnerability assessment for your site, the supplier's product specification has populated in their vulnerability assessment, which you can use as a reference. So the vulnerability criteria is dependent on your position in the supply chain. The intent of all of this is to eliminate as far as possible the administration work, whilst providing you with the flexibility to accurately record your risk information. Now, with assets, you can define for your site any areas and zones, and it's not limited to just production areas. You can record, for example, your goods intake area or your waste disposal area, and all of this is integrated with the incident system for trending purposes. You can also add in production lines and associate production lines with the areas and zones that you've already defined. Finally, with bulk raw material containers such as flour silos or oil tanks, this is integrated with the goods intake records, and if you receive raw materials into a bulk container, the loading history for that bulk container is automatically accumulated for the purposes of forward traceability. So I'll take you into incidents, and here we have a single register for all types of quality incident that could occur that your quality management system would want to record and take notice of. And it's all driven from the source of event information. So you may record an incident as a result of a customer complaint or foreign body detection equipment. If we say it's a customer complaint, the category of fault will adapt, and you can say that you might have complaints that are caused by delivery conditions, product quality, or have customer complaints that are attributable to a raw material or supplier fault. In each case, the subcategory of fault will adapt based on your initial selection. So you only have the one form that's adaptive to record every type of occurrence that your quality management system would want to take note of. And just to demonstrate again, if we say that we have proactive reporting based on pest control, subcategory becomes evidence of pest activity or potential for access. Now, I give you an example of an incident that we've recorded based on pieces of blue plastic having been discovered in a bread roll. And here you can see that it's been trended out. Incidents are associated with any of the raw materials or products that you have recorded on Food Portal, and are trended against areas and production lines that you have associated with your manufacturing site. And for each incident that occurs, you can record the immediate actions taken, and on the finalisation of your investigation, a root cause summary and a commentary on the effectiveness of preventative actions. You can upload an unlimited number of attachments for incidents. So, for example, if it was a customer complaint, you could upload the email or any photographic evidence that's been provided so that your entire management team has access to that. And in contrast to a lot of approaches that will determine a single root cause per incident, the incident system on Food Portal enables you to record an unlimited number of contributing factors, and each of these contributing factors is categorized out in this way. Having recorded your contributing factors, you can associate an unlimited number of responsive actions in corrective actions or preventative actions per contributing factor. So they become available to select from this drop down. And once you do this, you can determine whether it's a corrective or preventative action and assign responsibility to a particular individual. They can indicate the date that they've completed their action and upload evidence of completion. And the advantage of having these categories for both incidents and contributing factors and responsive actions is that all of your performance trending is completely automated. So here, the first thing to look at is that incidents are categorized as either proactive or reactive. So for the purposes of your food safety and quality culture measurement, you can make statements to the effect of an ideal food safety and quality culture would manifest itself through a greater number of proactive incidents than reactive incidents over a particular time period, and you can state objectively whether or not that is the case. You can look at the source of your event information to really determine where your most significant KPIs are for your production process, and where you've determined areas and zones and production lines. All of these things have their performance metrics trended out against each other. For customer complaints, you can see that it's displaying both category and subcategory on a rolling 365-day basis. And to drill down into product quality customer complaints, just for example, you only need to select it from this search box and it will give you a summary of the subcategories for product quality complaints. So it really takes the work out of that analysis. And the same approach has been used for all performance metrics across your production facility. So where you look at process incidents, you can really drill down into the category of process incident, and for product testing, you can look at defects associated with the taste panel, chemical or microbiological analytics. So everything that you would hope to be able to trend off is just presented, and there's no administration work required to get to this. And at the bottom, we can see that we have the root cause categorization for all of the contributing factors that led into incidents. And the advantage is that you're accumulating a mass of information compared to just recording a single root cause per incident. And again, for the purposes of your food safety and quality culture performance, you can actually isolate the types of contributing factor that are associated with culture and not systematic causes. So for example, if we take out anything that we don't think is cultural in nature, then here we've left on the chart only cultural factors, and we can say that the leading cause on the demonstration data is conflicts of interest throughout the QMS. So this really enables you to take a targeted approach to food safety and quality culture improvement. And finally, with preventative and corrective actions, it's just like the statement about being proactive in your approach. You can make statements to the effect of an ideal food safety and quality culture would have a greater number of preventative actions than corrective actions over a given time period. And you can state objectively whether or not that is the case for your quality management system. With process, we can take into account everything from recording purchase orders for raw materials right through to customer allocations of finished product. And just quickly, if we look at a purchase order here for Mexican honey coming from B Suite, you can see that there's no assumptions made about whether a purchase order will be received in a single hit or whether it's going to be a contract purchase with multiple call-offs. But when you schedule call-offs, they will be reflected immediately in your delivery schedule. And for example purposes, I'll come into a delivery for strong white flour, and you can navigate directly into your intake record from your delivery schedule. And you'll see that it's integrated directly with your raw material risk assessment for this supply route. So at the point of use, your goods intake staff have access to all of your acceptance criteria. You can record the delivery conditions for the vehicle, which includes your vehicle cleanliness, seal numbers and security tags. And for batches of raw material received, you can record everything from the manufacturer through to the bulk container that it's being received into, with a free text inspection record, which you can fill out based on your raw material risk assessment acceptance criteria. Now, each time you do that, your raw material batch is added to your batch table, and you can see that you're recording quantities and batch information. But in addition to that, you can associate an unlimited number of attachments to each raw material batch. And here, the chain share feature will be unchecked by default for each attachment that you put on. But if you elect to check this box, any attachments that you associate with raw material batches will be shared with customers that have those raw material batches included in products that they have associated with their orders. And that will become more clear and apparent as I explain further, but you have the opportunity to either opt in and share the files, or by default leave them private to your site. So here, for example, we have a delivery note confirming the quantity recorded as 20 tons, and we said that chain share was yes, and that would be shared with customers if it was included in their products. But we also have an invoice and it's saying no, chain share is off, and so that would be private and it would not be shared. For every raw material batch that you have, you also have a record of any works orders that it's been allocated into. So for the purposes of forward traceability on your raw material batches, you would never need to carry out a traceability exercise as a search. You only need to navigate into the raw material batches and it's simply displayed in that way. So going to works orders. Works orders can be scheduled by the date and shift, and coming into this works order for bread roll, you can see that you allocate in batches of raw material based on selecting batches that you've recorded as received, and the total input quantity is recorded against the works order, so that the total quantity of output batch can never exceed the total quantity of input materials. So you have this accounting assurance that you can't over allocate raw material batches. And when you have an output batch of an output batch of finished product, it will appear on this table here. And you can navigate directly into the output batch details to look at the release record for your batches of finished product. And in just the same way as for raw material batches, it's integrated with the product specification, so that for your quality inspection record, you can have a free text record of taste panel results or analytical testing results and check whether it's QC passed or not. By default, this will be unchecked. Now, for finished product batches, just like for raw materials, you can upload an unlimited number of attachments, and a chain share feature will allow you to opt in to sharing those attachments with your customers if you choose to. And any attachments associated with your finished product batches will be displayed in this table. So here, for example, the chain share feature has been set up to share with customers the taste panel results if they have this product allocated to their order. And the full history of customer allocations for the finished product batch is displayed in this record. So again, for traceability purposes, you don't need to carry out a traceability exercise in order to have that record available to you. Now, for customer allocations, you can allocate a quantity of your finished product batch to a customer order, and as soon as you do, it will appear in this table, And as a consequence of adding it into this table, your customer will receive an automatic email with a link to their product release record. So you can see that we've now come on to this is exactly how it would be presented to your customer if they follow their email link, and they get a summary of the traceability details. And for any attachments that are associated with the finished product batch which you have elected to share, they have access to those things here. And for input materials, there's a record of the quantity that you recorded as having received, as well as the attachments that you've elected to share using the chain share function. And for demonstration, here we can say that the intake records for the strong white flour, I've recorded that I received 15 tons of strong white flour, and I can evidence for my customers by the way of this delivery note that I did in fact receive 15 tons of strong white flour. So without having to do any further administration work, there's a very rich level of evidence-based details confirming to the customer that the material has been produced from a positive stock pool of raw materials. And if you associate your certificates of analysis or any release documents for your finished products, if you attach those and use the chain share feature, you don't subsequently need to email the customer with those COAs or CSEs. That extra step from QC can simply be automated as a consequence of that chain share feature. Now, coming into audits, your audits team can be defined, and it's you would choose users that you've created based on your food portal membership and add them to your internal auditing team and upload evidence of competency. When you receive your food portal account, it will come preloaded with BRC clauses, but you can add in extra compliance standards. And if we come into any of the audits, if you wanted to do additional custom audits, there's always the facility to do that. Here for demonstration, we're looking at HACCP, and you can see how all of the clauses are laid out. Anything that's on your internal audit list will appear on your internal audit risk assessment, and each of your internal audits can be risk assessed based on the risk associated with the activity, the previous audit performance, having identified robust compliance through to serious risks, and that ultimately enables you to determine an auditing frequency between 1 and 3 times per year. And having done that, anything that you risk assess will be available to select and add to your internal audit schedule. And for demonstration, I'll show you a HACCP audit. I'd like to mention you can complete a factory audit from a mobile phone or a tablet, and this is how it will be displayed on your screen. And all you'd need to do is say, okay, what clause am I auditing against currently? We'll say 214.1, and as soon as you select your clause, the auditing requirements are displayed for you. And for every observation that you make during an audit, you can indicate conformity or non-conformity and write a description of your observation. If you record non-conformity, it's immediately integrated into the incident management system. And if I was in the factory environment performing an audit from a mobile phone or a tablet, I could add on my objective evidence uploading directly from a camera phone. And you can add on as many photographs as you want, so there's no getting back to the office and having to sort through hundreds of digital photos to do your write-up. Similarly, with any observations of conformity, just click through to the link and you can upload an unlimited number of objective evidences to go with your audit. So it really means that you can have completed your audit and write-up in the factory with no further administration required when you get back to the office. So That's a whistle-stop tour of the food portal systems, and I've tried not to go into too much detail because this is a feature-rich system. But as a final mention, if this is of interest, you're free to self-register for a free trial at any time, and you would only need to click through on any of these buttons to get 14 days of free access. So one of our leanings is that the absolute best way for you to satisfy yourself that Food Portal is going to be a good fit for your needs is by getting that first-hand experience, and we'd really encourage you to do that. And finally, what I'd like to do is give you a quick tour of some of the open resources that you're welcome to make use of regardless of membership. So here, for example, we have an anonymised food safety and quality culture survey. And the nice thing about this is that any respondent can complete the survey from anywhere, even a mobile phone, and submit it. It will come to you as an email from Culture Survey at Food Portal, and that safeguards respondents' anonymity. There's a series of articles that we have written for food manufacturers, and the feedback has been very positive, so it's something well worth exploring. We have a free confidential reporting system which enables anyone to submit a confidential report via the web form, and there's a poster if you'd like to advertise that across your site. And the series of industry links is, I like to think of it as a bit of a treasure trove of technical and quality resources, really worth a look. And finally, we present this as the news feed. On the second Monday of each month, we'll email you out a prompt for horizon scanning, which references sources like the European Union Knowledge Centre for Food and Fraud, the FSA News and Alerts, and RASF and Food Recall Search. So it's a really good point of information that you can use these email alerts as evidence of having a reporting system for your surveillance, for your horizon scanning. So regardless of whether you elect to proceed with membership, please feel welcome to make use of those sorts of things, and keep in mind that you can start a free trial anytime you like.